Hello and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our sixth and final stakeholder meeting. The Alameda County RCD and Contra Costa RCD have had the pleasure of developing the regional priority plan for Alameda and Contra Costa counties. And I'd like to discuss our funding resources. This was made possible by the vision and long-term thinking and support of the Coastal Conservancy, which is part of the Natural Resources Agency, as well as the Department of Conservation. And I want to also present some of the folks that have been instrumental in ascertaining what a regional priority plan should look like, its contents, and important areas we want to include in our research and discussions. Chris Lim, who is sitting across the table from me, is the executive director for Contra Costa RCD. Ben Weiss, also from Contra Costa, is the agriculture conservation manager. And the grant was actually awarded to Contra Costa, and we're kind of a sub-grantee, but we've worked in partnership all along the way. I'm Catherine Boxer, CEO for Alameda County RCD, and I'd like to mention a couple of other staff who've been instrumental in developing the plan and presentations. That's Courtney Kuhn, who is a Resource Con 2 with the district, and Jennifer Trevis, who's a project assistant and very well skilled at the art and science of PowerPoint. So moving on, I think all of you know this, but just in case, please keep yourself muted. When we do pause for questions, please utilize the raise hand function. If you want to submit a question while a speaker is presenting, please put them in the chat and they will be answered when we pause for questions. And if there ends up being any questions that we don't have time to answer, we absolutely will send a follow-up email, and you can always email any of us, with questions. So moving right along to our agenda today, what we will first be sharing is the results of our priority ranking survey, a draft overview of the RPP document itself, and then how we envision our feedback process for the RPP. Ultimately, we will integrate appropriate comments into the final draft of the RPP, and we want to be sure to stay in touch with the various agencies, not only those that are participating today, but other agencies about funding opportunities. So Ben volunteered to keep on top of that. He's wonderful. And so you can also share funding opportunities with other associates when you receive them. So next, I'm going to briefly go over our regional priorities list. That does not mean that there aren't other priorities or projects identified, but these were the most frequently and significantly listed by folks that responded to our survey. There's a real need that was expressed for having more of the appropriate fire mitigation equipment and have adequate personnel to train and build their individual agency capabilities, but also interagency capacity building. Everyone about was interested in funding. There was also, understandably, given where we are in California in June, and with the multiple challenges that we are facing with climate change, there was a significant interest in expanding prescribed burning capabilities. Also, the sharing of fire education and outreach opportunities, getting support on fuel reduction projects. The fire personnel are experts, and so we will be looking to continue to work closely with them. But in order to safely execute any of our projects, there needs to be a lot of project and safety planning and ensuring we're using the right equipment. That really merges into long-term planning needs and management of those long-term plans to ensure that they're progressing, and whether you're in Alameda or Contra Costa County or elsewhere, you're working with your local agencies on plans, management, and the sharing of resources. Finally, in addition to our initial focus, which is mitigation planning, ultimately we will be addressing post-fire recovery plans. And so Ben will be speaking in a little while and providing more depth on that portion of our plan. And so with that, I would like to turn the slides over to Courtney Kuhn.
Hey everyone. Catherine, thanks for reminding us what our big topics were that we were ranking. At the last meeting, we introduced those topics, and shortly after that meeting sent out a survey like the one on your screen here. So that was sent via email. We asked for one person to fill out, or for you to only fill out one form per person, but to share with colleagues. The first question that we asked was to rank those categories that Catherine just went over, and then we had several follow-up questions ranking some subtopics after that. We ended up with 53 respondents, which we were very happy with. And we actually have a really nice group from a lot of different agencies and organizations. So kind of up there at the top were city and county government and other local governments, nonprofits, individual concerned citizens, but then we also had representation from fire departments and private businesses and universities, state agencies. We did not receive any feedback from indigenous or tribal organizations or federal agencies. And this is a table. I'm going to walk you through this. During the survey, we asked you to rank your first choice, your second choice, and your third choice. And then what I have here is the total number of votes of those, the number of stakeholders that voted it as a top 3 topic. So, for example, fuel reduction received 38 total votes of somebody voting for it as a top 3. And that was 71.7% of responses. So the number 1 most important topic that people voted on was fuel reduction, followed by long-term planning, and very closely behind were equipment and personnel and fire education, and then everything after that kind of got less and less votes. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ben, and he's going to go through the rankings of the subtopics.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, I'm here to talk now a little bit about the latter half of that survey that we sent out just over almost 2 months ago now, I guess, and had open for a few weeks. As you'll recall, within each of those regional priorities that we selected, there were a number of smaller projects or ideas or common themes that we tried to include within each regional priority with the goal of trying to just get more information. So within each priority, we're kind of trying to see what is the highest priority within that priority is almost one way to think about it. So we start kind of at the top here with the fuel reduction project support subtopic. Again, this is just a percentage of stakeholders that ultimately identified one or both of these individual kind of subtopics as a top priority. So leading the way here, by and large, within this fuel reduction project support subtopic was looking to increase the number and size of shaded fuel breaks, and then close behind it was another form of a fuel break, maintaining green belts around the wildland-urban interface and some agriculture as kind of wildfire buffers, knowing that those are more irrigated areas. So continuing to maintain and preserve those, as well as increasing fuel breaks, were some of the biggest priorities that our stakeholders told us. Moving right along within the long-term planning subtopic, again, kind of similar results, but the big topic that everyone seemed interested the most in was getting kind of on the watershed scale and doing some watershed scale planning around wildfire prevention, maybe as part of a larger watershed planning effort or separate entirely. And then it kind of trickles out and is fairly evenly spread amongst the rest of them there, but some good responses there. Within the equipment and personnel capacity building subtopic, we saw a real interest from the stakeholders that responded to this, that they wanted to continue to develop partnerships and increase interorganizational coordination That's a mouthful, which is great to hear because that's what we want to do, and that's, I think, what our region needs, and that's how stakeholders ultimately came back and said, yeah, we need to keep doing this and continue to do this effort together. This one was not surprising, but pretty interesting to say that by and large, the biggest subtopic, I guess, within the fire education subtopic was really getting on the ground, developing best management practice guides, and then educating public land managers and private land managers about how can they, reduce fuels and make their properties safer for wildfire prevention. I say I was kind of interested in this because over 90% of the stakeholders that responded identified this as a top 1 or 2 priority, and I think that's the second highest percentage we saw as we get through it. You can kind of see some of the others here, but a lot of interest in working together here to increase technical assistance and get more good work out on the land by educating people. So within the prescribed burning subtopic, we had a lot of stakeholders express interest in facilitating prescribed burning trainings or being a part of those trainings. And then equally important, working with the regulators to reduce some of that regulatory burden and developing a prescribed burn association. We're kind of interpreting this as, there's a real interest in trying to get prescribed burning out on the landscape and doing so in a safe way and a collaborative way across both counties. So that's something maybe to investigate in the next couple of years here in this region. This one was another really interesting subtopic to us. So again, we're talking specifically about resource sharing between agencies, be it for equipment, be it for projects, be it for personnel. And by and large, everything came out pretty dead even, which means there's a lot of potential collaboration here for resource sharing on all manner of projects. Nothing really stood out. Everyone kind of thought, I guess, almost equally that all of these are important projects or important parts of the resource sharing subtopic. So then within the post-fire recovery subtopic, I think this kind of goes a little bit hand in hand with one of the earlier subtopics that we saw. The highest priority that that the stakeholders identified for us was expanding the capacity for staff and organizations to do post-fire landscape management. And I think that segues and fits in nicely with another subtopic from a couple slides ago that was expand capacity for pre-fire work to reduce wildfires. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand capacity on both fronts there so that we're ready before the fire comes, and when it does come, we're ready afterward as well. Likewise, our stakeholders thought it was important to identify some really good strategies for post-fire recovery, getting some local resource guides here. What does that look like in Contra, Costa, and Alameda County? And they may exist, but I think it's worth taking a look at, using that to educate folks and get the word out there, or improve those resources if they're already out there too. So this was the highest percentage here at 100%. All of our stakeholders felt that this was a top priority, and either the highest priority or the second highest priority within the fundraising subtopic was the establishment of a long-term funding mechanism. I thought that was interesting because we're going to need it if we want to do this work. I believe within this, and you can refer back to the planning document when we get it to you, but there are a variety of different strategies we talked about through either maybe increasing a property tax, going through a ballot measure to get that done, or developing some fees for service, or really applying for and securing grants to provide some of this long-term funding. Again, 100% of everyone that took the survey said that this was a top priority or a second highest priority. Yeah. And then with that, it's 1:20. We can take some time here if anyone had any maybe thoughts or questions about some of the stuff we just talked about. If anyone saw some data they wanted me to revisit or wanted to maybe offer a counter opinion to, we can do that. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break here and come back in a couple of minutes. So with that, are there any questions, I guess, on this first half of the presentation? You can feel free to raise your hand or drop them in the chat, or give you a minute to type or find the hand button. right. See one here. Lily said this is great, and I will send it to her after.
Thank you, Ben.
No problem. All right. Well, with that, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Catherine. I just wanted to emphasize that in any emergency planning, there's phases, and essentially you're planning, identifying the hazards, and let's focus on fire here as we are, and then you mitigate the hazards through a number of mechanisms, and then you get your actual emergency response capabilities in place, purchased and in place, and many of these things are done concurrently. So you're able to respond quickly and effectively to an outbreak of a fire. After response, if we're lucky, then we are able to transition into post-fire recovery, which is assessing the damage, whether the damage is in wildlands, in WUI, or actual homes, which we sure hope doesn't occur. And then at that point, other agencies also get involved to help identify and list the damages, take photographs, you identify who's involved in addressing different issues and other key points. And the reason for doing that is so that post-emergency, if there is a local area declared emergency, or it could be a statewide declared emergency, you'll be gathering the data that you will need to submit for consideration by Federal Emergency Management Agency, but first the state of California. So there's a whole process. We didn't really address it comprehensively, but it's something we might want to look at in the future. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Ben.
All right. Let's see, there's another chat. Yeah, so since, let's give everyone just a quick 5-minute break. I know it says 10 in the slides, but we'll come back here at 1:30, 1:32. Give everyone a chance to stretch, and then afterward, we'll actually talk about the plan and kind of what some of the next steps are. Getting that into your hands hopefully early next week. So we will see everyone here in 5 minutes. All right, everyone, welcome back. With that, we'll turn it over to Courtney to talk to us a little bit about the plan organization and what we were doing.
Hey, everybody. Got a nice little stretch. Yeah, I'm just going to go over what you're going to be seeing when you get a chance to look at the final RPP. So when we were planning out the structure of this document, we looked at some other planning documents, particularly CWPPs in the area, and more or less tried to follow that structure. We start off with a quick little executive summary. Then we go, chapter 1 is an introduction that just kind of goes over where the funding came from, what the purpose of the document is, and so forth. It's followed by a more in-depth overview of the purpose and the outcomes that we were trying to achieve. And then chapter 3 is an overview of resource conservation districts and how we fit into this RPP planning process. Chapter 4 is like the densest chapter that we have. This goes really in depth into existing conditions and the mapping that we presented in the first few stakeholder meetings, and that you can still find online at it's all IGIS interactive. So that chapter is a text outline of what is in those maps, and then there's an appendix that has the actual maps themselves, but we still recommend to really be able to explore in that. Chapter 5 is the development process for the RPP, so the process that we followed with stakeholders and interviews, surveys, and that sort of stuff. Chapter 6 is more or less what we were just talking about in the first half of the presentation, talking about those priority topics and the subtopics and how we ranked, how you all ranked them. Chapter 7 is kind of a quick chapter talking about how this plan might be implemented, and some strategies along those lines, including some possible funding mechanisms. And then chapter 8 is conclusions with some recommendations for how we might want to manage this plan in the future, how often we should revisit it, and some what worked and what didn't work with the process. And then the last section is the appendix. So we've got lots of details in there, those maps that I mentioned, some extra long tables and big figures that didn't quite make sense to fit into the document itself. We've also got examples of the project submittal form and submitted projects. So that's projects that were both submitted to us, or that's just the projects that were submitted to us. There's 9 of them in there. And then we have projects compiled from other documents. So that's a big list of about 150 projects that have been compiled from CWPPs and other fire planning documents that are relevant to this RPP and that they protect natural resources, more or less. Then we have the survey data that we just kind of went over, and some stakeholder logos. So also want to remind you, if you want your logo to be included in this RPP, please email those to us as soon as possible. We'll have our emails listed at the end of this presentation. And then I'm gonna turn it back over to Ben.
All right, so our goal here, and one of our project team right now is on her way back on the plane, putting the document together in its final form and adding some beautiful text and formatting. So we should have that hopefully done by tomorrow, if not early Tuesday morning. And our goal is then to send that document, probably a link to that document Tuesday morning to the stakeholders so that you can get your hands on it. Start to review it for us, start to look at it, add comments or feedback as you see necessary. Again, it's about a 100-page document, I think, roughly, when we're looking at it. But we know that you probably don't need to review every single part of that. In particular, I'll go back here. We're looking for folks to really help us and provide feedback on Chapter 4, which is kind of that dense existing conditions analysis. We've got a lot of good subject matter in there, and we want to make sure we're fairly representing that, or if there's data you think that is missing still that could be of benefit to you. We probably won't be able to add it to Chapter 4 now, but we can certainly include it as a recommendation for the next time this gets updated. We're also looking for feedback primarily on Chapter 6, the ranking protocol, or the content that we just discussed with you. So if you have some other ideas or really want to immerse yourself in the data, that's the place to go for that. And you would help us out greatly if we're interpreting something wrong, or we're open to ideas. We want to make sure that this plan reflects what is being put into it by you, the stakeholders. So, and then we're also asking folks to review chapters 7 and 8, just to get a sense of kind of our rough implementation strategy. It's a little bit like building the road in front of you as you're driving along it, but we're trying to put something together on paper here so that we can start to implement this regional priority plan. And then chapter 8 is kind of our reflection and conclusions and recommendations based on what we've observed in this process, what we've learned through the process, and hopefully how we can recommend and give some of these state agencies and other agencies recommendations about what's happening here on the ground in Alameda and Contra Costa County. So again, we're looking for really heavy feedback on chapter 4 and then 6, 7, and 8. But of course, you're welcome to read the entire plan. So yeah, we'll be sending that Tuesday to you all. It'll probably be just a direct link on our hub website so that you can download it as you want to and read it. But then also in that email, we're going to be sending this RPP comment and feedback form. And this is going to be the primary mechanism that we use to collect and receive feedback from the stakeholders in this room and then on the Zoom call and virtually. So it's a quick, I think it's 4 or 5 questions. It's really not that bad, mostly paragraph, mostly just allowing you the time and the space to provide feedback to us. You know, it will help us if you can call out specific sections of it. You know, you really need to go back and look at this part or in this part. That would benefit us greatly. Yeah. If you have, I guess I'll get to it in just a second here. If you have maybe broader feedback on the document that you don't think you're going to be able to fit into a Google form, you're more than welcome to email us at either of these email addresses. We encourage you to email both, just because we are monitoring both emails, but I'm only monitoring the CCRCD emails, and Jennifer and Courtney are monitoring the Alameda County RCD emails. So we just want to make sure that everyone's seeing everything there. With any of the feedback that's provided, we're going to try our best to incorporate it into the document, and if we can't incorporate it into the document, we'll try to include it in the recommendations for the next set of folks that are going to try to update this plan. With that, I did want to launch a quick Zoom poll here. So one of the questions that we've been you know, throwing around our project team meetings, and this is something that you're going to be asked on the feedback form as well, is how often do we need to update this regional priority plan? I think, Chris, if you want to run that poll.
Should be going. You can see that? Yeah.
Okay, cool. I can't see if it's going or not. Yeah. So I believe we gave you 5 options there, basically anywhere from 1 to 5 years. To my knowledge, CWPPs are updated every 3 to 5 years. We really don't know what a good frequency is for this. We want this to be useful, but we also know that, you know, plans need updating and they need to reflect, you know, priorities that could easily change in the next 2 years. So as soon as we're done there, we can talk about the results maybe a little bit, but we're really curious on that. I just wanted to get a poll of the room really quick and see what folks are landing on.
We're at 66% right now. It's still going. So.
Okay. So it looks like about 70% of you have responded to that. We'll give you just a few more seconds here to get your answer in. This isn't, you know, we're not, I guess this will recommend this maybe update to some of the state agencies when it comes time, but we're not, this is just kind of, I don't know if the state agency knows how often they want to update it, so we can hope to inform that a little bit here too.
I think we're good. We're at 75%, and then the highest is every 2 years at 33%, and every 3 years at 28%.
So 2 to 3 years is what I'm hearing. Yeah, so if you didn't hear that from Chris, it sounds like folks, you're recommending that we probably should take a look at these over the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah, that's great information. So again, that's going to be one of the questions you're going to see on that feedback form. And we'll ultimately kind of recommend that up to the state that, you know, hey, we as a stakeholder community think we need to update this in 3 years' time. And I'm sure Lily and the State Coastal Conservancy will appreciate having that. See, oh, too far. So what happens to the RPP last? So over the next couple of weeks, we're opening that feedback form from June 21st to July 1st, I believe. So closing it right before the 4th of July long weekend and the holiday there. So after that, the RPP team, we're going to take your comments, your feedback. We'll start to incorporate that into the draft document. And we're hoping that we can get that all together in probably 2 or 3 weeks and try to get a final regional priority planning document to you, the stakeholders, on, I won't say a date, but probably by about the end of July. So what happens to the plan after that? We're going to be hosting both of the plans on both the Alameda County RCD website and then on the Contra Costa RCD website. So you can, I'm sure if you Google RPP Alameda County or Contra Costa County here in a couple of years, you'll find it that way. We're also going to be posting it to our ArcGIS Hub website. That website should probably stay active for another couple of years. We've got some credits that will allow that to continue. So that'll continue to be a resource if you're looking for mapping data or other information about this planning process. We'll be posting a recording of this video too after there, as well as all the other previous recordings. So you should be able to find it there. Finally, we're going to be sending this off to the State Coastal Conservancy, our funders, who will then share it with, I assume, the Department of Conservation, who are their funders, and probably a few other state agencies to inform maybe some funding decisions coming down the pipeline, or what are the needs specifically here in Alameda and Contra Costa County. So that's ultimately where the RPP will be for you, the stakeholders, ultimately to, as you're developing grant applications or other funding mechanisms, you'll have supportive documents that say, we're trying to do this, and our stakeholders identified this as a regional priority. So we hope to support you guys in that way in years to come. So then the other thing I wanted to talk briefly about too, Courtney mentioned this in the appendix. We do have a pretty robust spreadsheet that we're going to be converting into a Word document and including in the appendix that is more or less a breakdown of currently known funding opportunities through, I think it's mostly state and federal grants that are just out there and for the most part have been annually funded and could potentially fund some of these RPP projects. That will be current as of July 2022. So there will be new funding coming down the pipe, we're sure, or from other funding sources that we may not know about yet. So in order to try and keep this kind of loose collection of folks together, our stakeholders here, we've also got a question on the feedback form that asks folks to opt into kind of we're calling it a working group, kind of a mailing list, but more or less a very loose collection of stakeholders that are interested in learning about funding opportunities that will come around and identify maybe potential partnerships through that. I know that we all get enough emails anyway. I don't plan to use this list to blast out about every potential funding opportunity that's related to wildfire, but I think we'd be remiss because we've collected, I think, over 150 people have attended at least one of these meetings over the last year and a half, and that's a pretty good group. So we want to do as much as we can to keep that group going together and working together to develop some of these projects that are going to come out of this plan and reduce wildfire here and protect natural resources. So for now, we'll call it just kind of a working group mailing list. Feel free to drop your email in there. We'll update folks from time to time on funding opportunities as we see them come around. But we also want that to be just a collaborative space. Find ways for people to participate together and network and develop projects together for greater impact. And with that, just a quick review here. So again, we're going to try to get this final document to you here June 21st. That's next Tuesday. From June 21st to July 1st, that's when we're opening the feedback to folks to get back to us. And then hopefully mid-July to late July, we will send out the final version to folks or post the link for folks to go visit. And that will conclude this process. So yeah, I guess we're officially almost done. So thank you all for sticking with us and for being a part of this planning process. It's from the beginning, this isn't something that the RCDs were set out to us to dictate what needs to happen. We wanted this to be collaborative, and I like to think it was. And that was made in part because you, the stakeholders, decided to show up and listen to us talk for an hour. I will turn to Chris and Catherine if you guys have any other closing remarks, or we can answer some questions if folks have them too in the chat. I see the chat's active, but cool. Oh, just people dropping links. Yeah, I guess, are there any questions from the stakeholders? Feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, drop a question in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it. Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, this is Catherine from Alameda County RCD. one of the important fuel reduction techniques that is used widely these days, that was listed on a couple of the presentation pages, is grazing management plans, where we're utilizing domestic animals, cows, sheep, goats, to keep the grass down and help keep brush, etc., from overgrowth. Also, I'm aware that fire agencies have a lot of BMPs, best management practices. So if there's a fire agency still listening and you want to send us your BMPs, that'd be kind of great. Also, something that I still would like to add to the plan, we didn't talk a lot about, was the protection of wildlife, endangered species, etc. So that's a really important element, and wildlife, if it's a really windy day and very dry vegetation, they're very much at risk. So just another concern I wanted to mention. Maybe we can get more discussion around in the future.
All right. Thanks, Catherine. Any other questions from or comments from the stakeholders? All right, I'll give one final plug here. Again, we're looking for logos to include just in the appendix as folks that helped us in this effort. We will try to go out and find them, but if you could all save us some time by just emailing them to us too, that's really just going to help us out. So if you're interested in getting your logo on the page, feel free to send it to us. Otherwise, we'll try to track it down as best we can online. Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to our funders and all the folks who are in on all these meetings, helping out, providing inputs, and we hope that this plan is something moving forward that folks are going to be able to reference and use for potential projects. And just a big shout out to Carol Rice for helping us out with her consulting help, and then a big shout out to the Alameda folks for all of their work into this as well. It was a real nice team effort. So we're happy to put it out for folks. Thank you.
All right, anything to say, Catherine?
We very much look forward to hearing back from the Coastal Conservancy, and quite hopeful that there may be funding allocations in the future to conduct certain high priority projects to get actual on the ground fire mitigation work going here in Alameda and Contra Costa County. So thank you, Coastal Conservancy and DOC.
All right, and with that, I guess we can leave the room open, but we're done here. If folks want to chat with us about anything, or with that, thanks for your time, and keep an eye on your inboxes for the plan. It should be there next week.